into this. We'll talk about, it'll be more toward when we're closing, because there's some more important things I want to get to first. But later, before we leave, we will talk about something called the Nibiru and Dyadic crystal grid. Because this is the little monster, the little black spider that I vaguely mentioned the other day, that has been doing this to the DNA of everything on this planet. And when you mess up the DNA, because you have messed up templates, it severs the consciousness from integrating. We have not been able to remember who we are or to bring in our natural memory banks of our higher dimensional connections, and we haven't even been able to remember that we are the consciousness that's forming our body. We've been out of touch with the illusion. The hologram appears as if it has nothing to do with us. It popped in here somehow, and we have to figure out how to survive in it. Because of these mutations, it's changed the way our consciousness can perceive, and it looks like we're locked in to a world that's externalized from us. As we begin to realize that we're manufacturing the hologram, and the reason we didn't know that was because there have been things done to the DNA that have made it so it's very, very difficult to see where your consciousness goes between those moments. It's like it's edited out all the other stuff that happens between the moments of the hologram projecting out and coming back in. The moments when you return to vibration and you're no longer in light, which means your body disappears. You don't see that anymore. It's not in your perceptions, because you go, when you turn back into vibration, your consciousness goes hyperdimensional. It goes up to the next octave of vibration, which means it literally demanifests here and gets more closely into its relationship with itself as source. It goes back into sound. Once upon a time, we knew that. We could feel it in our bodies. We could maintain the illusion of having a body that stays put. We didn't all disappear and reappear before our eyes. It would be a little strange to walk the hologram that way. So we could play in the illusion of matter while fully knowing that there was a part of us in each of those stations of consciousness simultaneously, and we were all switching off back and forth. There's an information relay system. We knew how to talk to our molecules, and if we wanted to shift angular rotation of particle spin, we'd simply envision certain symbols, and the molecules would say, okay, and they would shift the particle spin, and we had full access to going places and doing things that would only seem imaginary right now. The mutation that's taken place in the DNA has not been able to be fixed for thousands and thousands of years because the planetary grids could not run D12 frequency. D12 frequency holds intact the original spectrum of dimension 12 all the way down to dimension 1 frequency. It is the strongest frequency of all of them, so it has the power to override any distortions in the lower dimensional frequencies in a template and reset them to their original divine blueprint. That's why we all have a divine blueprint, that D12 pre-matter blueprint that's made of D12 frequency. Once it's activated in the body, it has the ability to begin purging out the distortions, blockages, and mutations that right now are keeping our chemical DNA as if it's being strangled by the neck. It goes right down into the number of chromosomes. When they look at our chromosomes, the chromosome count is hysterical, the way science is exploring it right now. What it appears to be in the hologram, she has such a weird chromosome counts. Like crayfish have more chromosomes than humans. Cherries have more chromosomes than humans, some kinds of them. And it was even surprising to the scientists because they thought, well, gee, you'd think more complex life forms would have more chromosomes. What they're seeing right now are half pieces of chromosomes that bond together artificially that form what appears to be whole chromosomes that aren't even whole chromosomes. They're seeing fragments and calling them wholes. They're seeing sequences of things that they call genes that are actually portions of genes that the rest of the sequences are missing. There's a bunch of stuff they call junk DNA. Junk DNA is a riot. Junk DNA has to do with, I believe they're called intron sequences of DNA, which appear to be, they're sitting there in the chains, but they don't do anything. They don't make proteins, okay? DNA manufactures proteins and the chemicals that begin the process of the building blocks of life to build up the organic tissue. So there's all of these sequences, huge sequences of intron DNA that is not doing anything. So they call it junk because it seems to be junk, because it seems to not do anything. They're all the spaces where the other stuff that if our templates were turned on would manifest other chemical combinations. So as we begin to work with healing the DNA, there's going to be changes, but slowly but progressively. When they hit critical mass, will happen in the template, and they'll build up critical mass and begin to be part of the hologram, where all of a sudden, it's going to be really funny because there's going to be a few waves where big changes come at once, where science gets to look under microscopes with some people's DNA and finds out that, what did it do? What are those things in there? Is that a chemical? It can't be a chemical. Well, only a base 4 gene code, so it can't be that. They're assuming it's only a base 4 gene code. There's going to be all sorts of things popping up and happening in DNA. One of the most amazing is those sad little lonesome hydrogen bonds that link together the DNA base pairs that hold the ladder chains together. They're going to come to life, and there's going to be new chemicals that form in them. They're called the turnstile DNA sequence, turnstile and spacer DNA sequences. Now, spacer DNA is another type of what they call junk DNA that they have identified, stuff that sits there between, I think that's between separate genes, and it doesn't do anything. The spacer DNA is going to come to life as the hydrogen bonds come to life, and new chemicals, one called celestylene, is going to be formed. And when that happens, all sorts of cool stuff starts to happen in the body. That's when the body has the potentiality to really shift its molecular base and the angular rotational particle spin, which will shift its completely the vibration and spin of its particles to the point where you can literally move through a time portal here and end up someplace else without losing your body doing it. So there's amazing things happening, and the problem is these things, our DNA is going to activate. It's already starting to activate at a higher level because the planet is going through a stellar activation cycle, which means even if the planetary grids are damaged, once the stellar activation cycle starts, the frequency is coming in, and it's going to come in, and if it hits a distorted template, it's going to throw all sorts of distortions all over the place, but it's still going to come in and push its way into the hologram. Same thing with your personal DNA template. When the planet starts to run these frequencies distorted, it's going to start running through you, and it's going to be distorted, and it's going to cause all sorts of crazy type of things. There are a lot of people that are going to end up sick if they don't do something, and if the indigos can't create a protection field enough for them. Indigos, as a collective, have the ability to directly interface with the mass reality field here. They can literally set a field that will assist in the clearing of the DNA templates of huge amounts of people here who couldn't be bothered with learning this stuff, but they can at least help them to clear the blockages. Because when you hit a blockage, what happens is the energy can't go anyplace, so it starts to refract. It's still pushing. It'll go and it'll start bouncing around and create chaotic patterns of all sorts. Now, these chaotic patterns in the template are going to come out in the hologram, and the first stop on the way through the hologram train is the body, the physical body, the emotional body, the feeling centers. So there's going to be emotional disruption, there's going to be mental disruption for some people, depending on where their blockages are. If they have a lot of blockages in the third DNA strand template that's connected to the part of ourselves that we call the mental body, that's the part that right now is choosing what thought forms it's going to use. You're going to have distortions in the chemicals, because chemicals are what, when we have myons and dions, and we start to create myon and dion fields, they take on chemical clothing. So the chemicals, carriers in the brain of the myons and dions, are going to start to do things and change, which is going to create imbalances in the way the brain chemicals work for some people. Not everybody, but for some. Now, if you can stabilize it there, if you don't clear it, it goes someplace. People that can manage to stabilize their thought patterns on the mental level, if they don't heal them and literally transmute the disharmonic patterns, they will start to drop in frequency, go down to strand 2, and they will start affecting the emotional body. So it'll be your mind may be just fine, and you're calm, cool, collected, and detached, but your emotional body is raging, right? Where it's like screaming because all these energies, you're stuffing them down in because you want to stay stable and focused and in control. So instead of letting the stuff come out saying, this is a disharmonic pattern, now I have to make some choices about how I will heal this and how I will remove it and transmute it to a higher level. If you just think, I'm not going to deal with that, nope, I'm not going to look at that part, you're stuffing it all down into your emotional body and into your physical body, which is causing more distortions in the second and first DNA strand template. Now, people that repress their emotions, that's the next step in the repression game, where you got your mind under control, or so you think, then your emotions start to drag you all over. This is where your mind is in perfect control. 99% of the time you're doing really, really well, and you're such a nice person. But every once in a while, you either have this absolute, like a week of just absolute depression. You start to go into like that manic depressive mode where sometimes I'm high and sometimes I just want to be dead because I can't stand it. And you kind of, and then the other part of yourself, your mental body goes, what is wrong with me? Oh boy. And he said, all right, the emotions aren't good things. Emotions are like dragging me around, and I can't be as calm, cool, and collected as I want to be. So you get afraid of your own emotions, which makes you want to repress them more. Sometimes they won't come out in that passive stance of just, I feel bad, I feel good, I feel bad, I feel good. Sometimes you get so sick of that one that it just builds up, and then it just comes out and goes, wah, I'm angry, you know? And I'm angry can come out in many different ways. It can come out in, you just bite somebody's face off verbally, and you feel really bad afterwards. I shouldn't have done that. I didn't know, well, yeah, I felt that, but it wasn't really that intense. You know, it just had this fuel behind it, like rocket fuel that came out of somewhere. You will find another way anger comes out is because you have so much control in your mental body that you would never, ever, ever do that to somebody because you're much nicer than that, but you still have this rage wanting to go somewhere. So, some people run to the refrigerator. I will eat it away. It comforts it. It brings more energy and comforts it, so my brain can be distracted. My emotional body can get distracted with processing telluric elements that are in the food. So it comforts me so I don't have to deal with the fact that I'm angry, right? Addictive behavior is coming, like all sorts of addictive behavior comes out of this repressed rage and anger from disharmonic patterns that are being stuffed into the emotional body. And they create chemical realities in the body that actually make chemical addictions happen, where your chemicals all of a sudden crave chemicals from over here. Be it carbohydrates if you went in that direction, nicotine if you went in that direction. I still function on nicotine because when I walked into this body, it was already running on that pattern. It'll take me 6 months to clear that pattern, and I haven't had the time to stop yet. You know? So when we start to understand that the parts of ourselves that are least understandable and that we don't like to deal with, the parts that do things that we wish we didn't, that part that just compels you to go to the fridge or compels you to pick up the cigarette or compels you to go drink 4 times as much as you know you can process, these kind of things are coming from the emotional body level in the second strand and the first strand, the physical chemical stuff of the D1 imprint that's going right down into your subatomic particles that are saying, feed me this, feed me this. So your mental body is trying to say, I have control. I will not do this today. You know, in 6 weeks' time, if I don't do this, I'll be at this level. But you never get to that point in time because the chemicals override you. Your mental body's trying to hold on, and trying to hold on is what is perpetuating the problem. You're trying to stay in control. You're trying to control these behaviors and repress them instead of understanding the lesson that's in them. There's a message in them. They're crying out. They're parts of yourself that are crying out and say, help, I need healing. There's a blockage in my template here. This is what these type of behaviors are about. Sometimes, now if you can take it back to its energy form, myons. You're made of myons. You just appear to be made of other stuff. That's the hologram. You're made of myons. So there are myons that are distorted in the frequency bands that are below the myons that this part of your consciousness is composed of. You have the power because you are here in a faster flash line. Your myons are faster here. So they have the ability to straighten out those other ones. But right now, this part of the mind has been slowed to an unnatural rate because of the Merkaba spins, and this one has been picked up. So actually your physical and your emotional bodies are running at more intensity than your mental body, which means your mental body is having a heck of a time trying to direct the flashline sequences and the myons below it. The first thing you can do is realize, if you're going to heal the hologram, take it back to its core. Energy. Okay? Myons, dions, and their interactions. You can fight with yourself and go through psychoanalysis from now until eternity, but you're not going to fix 99% of what's creating the problem that got you there in the first place. Energy is the solution to it. And the way you can get to the point where you can clear these things, and clearing is not always fun. I mean, you start to work with the stuff that will clear it. Realize, you know how if a person drinks too much and they drink that last drink and they just know, uh-oh. Body tolerance has been exceeded. And the stomach just sends up a message that says, better find a bathroom. Because you know you're going to lose it, right? The body has hit its tolerance of what is toxic to it, and it will purge it. And the whole process of that purging is not fun, and it's not pretty, but after it's done, you feel a lot better. You're usually pretty tired, but you feel a lot better. I've watched people go through this a lot of times. You know, the drinking was easy. People that get addicted to drugs go through absolute hell with that purging because those chemicals really bond to the DNA template. So they're literally having to rip them back out of the template to get them out of the system. Now, when we go through milder versions where we're not horribly addicted to anything, so we have some control over our being, and we seem to anyway, you'll be surprised at what comes up out of your emotional body level. There'll be all sorts of yucky feelings sometimes that come up. You'll wake up and have a day, you just wake up, come into consciousness going, oh, yuck. It's a processing day. I can just feel it. Because you can feel the stuff hanging there, getting ready to birth itself out into your hologram. And where is it? It's right here right now. It's in your body. So it feels yucky, and as you proceed through your day, it goes out of your body, and usually it comes out in attitude. It comes out in the emotional signals you're sending to other people, and then they throw some back at you because they didn't like what you sent, and you walk through it. And eventually you'll notice, whatever that was, and sometimes it'll come out in like repeated fights with a certain person. You and them have an issue that matches, right? And you're each taking a different polarized stance. So you will have that interaction, that purging interaction happening. Sometimes anger is healing, where you'll start to get angry about something and you'll have a really heated dialogue with someone. And then you kind of look at each other. Do you ever have one of these arguments where you can get in a screaming fit with somebody, they're screaming at you and you're screaming at them, and then a part of it, each of you at the same time sometimes realizes, this is funny. Well, there's a part that becomes aware because you're letting the energy out. You're letting the disharmonic energy come out, so at least you're not stuffing it down and repressing it. You're resolving an issue. There's two vibrational patterns that are all chaotic, and they're crashing into each other, and as they crash in, parts of them are starting to harmonize, but it looks like a big fight on the outside. There's a part of you that can recognize this, and as you get into higher strand activation, you'll start to get that little, part of you sitting on your shoulder going, saying to the other one that has to the person's shoulder, do you see it yet? This is funny. I don't figure it out yet, but it's funny. We're standing here screaming at each other. You might start to remember, oh my God, we had this fight 5,000 years ago. This isn't ours, this is theirs. You might start processing some of the issues that really aren't too much for you right now, but they started to come through your template because you activated strands that brought you into an open consciousness flow with a different time period with that person. I've had the funniest experiences with this. Oh my goodness. I remember one person who was associated with the Akhenaten Pharaoh period, and we had an incarnation there. And we had this one big fight because he was getting really tied up with the Anunnaki, and he was really screwing up things that a lot of people depended on him to do. And he had blamed me for certain things because I wouldn't cooperate. And he was like, over my dead body, I'll cooperate with those guys when they're trying to come in here and take over. You think it's the easier way? Well, in the long run, it won't be. We ended up calling each other spontaneously by the same names, and then looked at each other and, oh, we're still doing it. We brought our incarnational memory right into focus here in the current time. It brought that time period right here where we saw the tension that we were experiencing was the tension we were experiencing back there. It made it a lot easier when we realized, oh, well, we're in a different framework now. It doesn't really matter who's going to be on the throne of Egypt because the throne of Egypt isn't in this hologram anymore. Can we call a truce? That kind of thing. So as we work with technologies that will bring us into more healing in our DNA, so our hologram starts to have a little more stability, and so our emotional bodies can get cleared out, we will have some interesting days and experiences. You have to be gentle with yourself and forgive yourself ahead of time. Don't allow yourself to get so angry at yourself that you start judging yourself. You need to stay in love with yourself, a state of vibrational harmonization. And you need to stay in love with other people too, realizing if they're having a bad day, and some of them might want to make it your fault. If there's a light, it's a pattern that's in there where we start to try to project it out into, okay, I feel this, it's because of that, and you throw it at people. It's actually an implant running through the grids that causes us to do that. It takes our thought field and teaches us to throw it at the object that we're seeing, thinking it's separate from ourselves, instead of saying, oh, okay, that's coming from me. You need to start with forgiveness, which is a willingness to say, we're in a life process here, and it doesn't always look absolutely perfect, but it is perfect in the process that is going on. The perfection is given, but we need to expand what our perception of the word perfection means. Perfection is, you are perfectly yourself right now, and they are perfectly themselves right now. And as faces of God, you need to accept the fact that this is perfectly who we need to be right now. Sometimes being in your imperfection, or what appears to be imperfection, is your fastest way of healing or helping someone else to heal. There are reasons behind the illusion. So if we learn to be gentle with ourselves and get a little bit of mental body savvy, you say, aha, that's one of those emotions coming up. Oh, this is one of those conversations coming up, where you can not get sucked in to the energy of what the miasmic clearing is doing, what clearing those distorted patterns is doing. You can still clear them. You don't disengage. You have to engage them. Let them run. You have to let the yucky feelings come up and come out. It helps a lot if you can learn to direct them effectively, where they're coming up and out. It's kind of like when you have to go throw up. You don't want to throw up all over everybody around you, so you kind of try to go someplace where you're not going to damage anything and let it come up. There are times when you will do it with other people, but one of the most effective ways to do it is with sound. Before it gets to the point where you put words on the sound, go back to what are words? Words are sound. When we throw stuff at other people because we had a bad day and we just lost it, we got to the point where we're just so tired, you just can't be nice anymore because the emotional body comes up and runs over your mental body. Usually it comes out in words or actions. Usually with women, it comes out in words and tears. Now, women have anger too, and they can come out, and they can come out where it's physically directed, and they can hit and those kind of things. Where males, just because of the orientation of the percentage of myons and dyons that the bodies and the consciousness are composed of, if you can understand male-female principle with it, you have the myon, which draws in, all right, and you have the dyon, which projects out. So the female body is built on a percentage of having more myon to dyon ratio, just a little bit. But that little bit creates the gender difference. That little bit also creates the consciousness as more likely to turn in on itself and to go this way when it's having disharmony, and to like have a nervous breakdown inside and go cry in your pillow and those kind of things. Where the first impulse, the fight or flight stuff, will come out. Women tend to fly. They'll fly into themselves and out and away and jump out of their bodies if they can. They'll go into the astral state. A lot of people would just literally walk around with their astral body here and their head here because they don't want to feel the emotional body here. That tends to be a female stance that's coming from drawing in. The urge to draw in comes from literally what your consciousness is composed of as more myons. Now, the male body has the more of a push. It's a transmitter. It has more of a transmitting charge. So the fight or flight instinct, it's translated more into the fight pattern where it throws energy out this way. Honestly, males and females, the female is in the male and the male is in the female. We're androgynous beings. We're just amplifying one polarity a little bit more. We can learn to balance those things. I mean, there are women right now, we're going into a cycle where the polarities are beginning to merge in the self. So you're finding lots more women who feel free to be violent when necessary, and you're finding a lot more men who are finding it's just fine to go cry. And that's good. That means your myons and dyons inside of yourself and your consciousness are starting to balance each other. But when we get into clearing phases, sound is the most powerful healing modality there is. There are times when, if you can just let sound, let those chaotic patterns sound themselves, but not attach them to a language pattern. Not the language pattern your mental body is used to using. Because then you're assigning value and meaning to it that implies something else. You're giving it an intention that way. When you're just trying to clear a bunch of chaos patterns that you don't even know what the intention is, you attach it to an intention that says, it's because of this, and this is what's making this happen, so that's where I'm going to direct this. You're creating an issue. You're creating a thought pattern, conflict drama. If you can go behind that and realize when an icky pattern comes up, it doesn't mean you're denying that you have to do something about something in your life that's making this happen. If a person said something to you and that offended me, well, I'm going to tell you about it. Before you tell them about it, go back to sound first and deal with yourself and what the feeling really is. Because we tend to, like attracts like with chaotic patterns. Right? If we're having a conflict pattern, just conflicting feelings coming up, and they're looking for something to attach to so they can get bigger and they can go into the hologram, and you give them, it's like throwing them a little lifeline. Say, here you go. It might be this. It could be that this person said this to me. Try that. And the emotion goes, yep, that's what's making me feel bad. It's your fault. And then you get mad at the person or upset by the person, and you project it all into the relationship, and then you play ping pong for a while. There's a way to deal with it behind that. And meanwhile, every time you play ping pong, well, you say this, well, I say this, well, you say this, and I say this. What are you doing? You're building the energy, you're amplifying it, and it comes back on when times you disappear, it comes back as amplified energy, and it gets projected out as even more amplified issues the next time. Thought accretes, and what you put into it expands. So it's very wise to be careful how much energy you want to invest in a thought pattern. If you can realize that behind every thought pattern and the disharmonic stuff that'll come up for you, there is really just a sound tone problem. It's like you have a little choir of scalar waves in there, and there's a few of them singing out of tune, and it's messing up the whole sound of the choir. Now, you don't kick them out of the choir, because they're permanent residents. You can't kick them out of the choir. But you can gently work with them to let them say, okay, just try this. Give them tone that will first allow them to express, to diffuse some of the charge. Which means go out in a place where there's not too many people around, so you don't have to worry about it, and so they don't have to worry about it. And say, okay, I feel that feeling that I can't even define. I won't define it. Once you define it, you label it and you make it a thing. That's when you make it a thought. That's when you give it an identity that's going to go bouncing out into your hologram. Notice it as a feeling. This is energy. Don't assign a judgment to it. Now, this is yucky, icky energy. I don't like you, all right, I'll deal with you. You just assigned a meaning to it, and it's going to come back and say, that's not very nice, and it's going to throw energy back at you, so you're going to play ping pong with your own self. You identify it as energy. And we do this all the time. These are the patterns we're so used to dealing with ourselves on. We run our emotional bodies on a literally subconscious level, so we don't have to deal with the fact that it's really a mess when we start to try to communicate with each other. That part of ourselves and this part of ourselves never seem to agree with each other. If you just deal with it as sound, where you go into acknowledging a feeling, because your emotional body talks to you first as feeling. It'll either be a good feeling, and indigos are usually very sensitive to it, because they have more aparthy. Those little receivers for frequency, indigos have more because they have more than 12 strands. So they are more sensitive to all the subharmonics around them. Identify the feeling. If it's an icky feeling, it feels like an icky feeling. Say, from this perspective, it could be perceived as an icky feeling. It's how you talk to yourself that starts to change how you can interact with it. And you say, that could be identified as icky, but really it's just energy. I'm not going to assign a value to it. It's just an energy pattern. First of all, when you assign a value to it, if you look at something and say, oh, isn't that beautiful? You get this, feeling that spreads through you. If you say, look at something, and it can be a nothing. It can be like a little pebble sitting on top of a leaf. And to some people, they go, oh, it's beautiful. And they would just open up and go right into full resonance with the beauty of this thing. Another person, depending on where their consciousness is, that they could come up and look and say, oh, that's horrible. Feel the difference between just using those word patterns. Say it to yourself in your mind. Even say it outside. Say this with me. Isn't that beautiful? Feel what it does around your arms and stuff. That's a cool feeling, isn't it? You just created an energy signature. How did you do it? You used tones in the form of what you call words. They have a living energy signature. Now say, oh, that's horrible. Try to feel what it does. It does something to you. The tones that you use in the words that you use to represent what you're doing create a total response in the emotional body, and they will bring up the chaotic energy patterns and organize them along the line of what you just said. There's a way to say, that's nice, or that is. Simply, that is, and let it be. Where, yes, it could be horrible, it could be beautiful. It's actually both, in its own way. This is where you have engaged, because you're letting the feelings move through you, you're acknowledging them, you're not burying them. You're saying, yes, I will feel this, but you're going to choose a different way you're going to react to what you're feeling. You're going to choose to say, interesting energy pattern. You can say that with joy feelings or with icky feelings. The big challenge comes when the stuff gets down, when the distorted patterns get so distorted that they start to affect the first DNA strand, because that's going to directly change what your particle base is doing on a subatomic level, and it's going to start with the inside of your body. That's where you get physically sick. The big scary one is to hear the word, the big C word. You go to a doctor, you haven't feel good, and the doctor says, you have cancer. There's just a signature. It's like somebody grabbed your breath from you. Because it's a kick, like really here, you can feel it. It's like all of a sudden, I am dying and there's nothing I can do about it. That's what the mind translates it into. Now, the big challenge is when you have things with the body that you really feel totally out of control with. You don't know what to do with the pattern at this time. It's still extremely important what words you choose to interpret the experience. This is where your free will, your freedom of choice, comes in. This is where you can use your freedom of choice to bind you into the hologram and let it run over you, or to begin your freedom process from the hologram so you can begin to master it. When we talk about assigning value judgment, making one thing bad and another thing good, now that doesn't mean everything is equal in itself as far as, well, you might as well go be a mass murderer because it doesn't matter. You know, they're both just, that's as good as being a priest or, a God being. Not exactly. It means you can acknowledge a disharmonic pattern as a disharmonic pattern. You can acknowledge that it has a counterpart. Somewhere there is a harmonic pattern. Somewhere there is the divine right expression of what appears to be a divine wrong. But what you're not going to do is attach yourself to either of those manifestations. If you need it always to be the right one, you are literally locking yourself into polarity, which will continually draw to you the other one. What you need to do is realize and trust a process that's involved. You can identify, okay, this appears to be the way this thing is. Somewhere, if it's a problem, it implies that the solution exists. And the solution isn't someplace else because everything's happening now. It's all in your little holographic space inside your Merkaba vehicle that all this projection's taking place. If you see a problem, the only thing it's telling you that you're seeing the lower frequency bands of that energy pattern. The problem is simply an energy pattern that will come into a set of actions in your hologram. It's an energy pattern that if it seems like a problem, you're actually perceiving its lower disharmonic state, which implies it has its other already harmonized divine blueprint state. If you can react to trauma and joy in an equal way, engaging them, but in a detached way, where you're not too attached to what the outcome is going to be, because you know whatever outcome is will be the highest. You've just taught your mind to say, I am creating the highest pattern here. I will bring the divine blueprint in, but I will not assign value as to how I think from this level that's supposed to look. All right? That's the beginning, where you learn to surrender a little bit, not your power to anybody else, but you surrender your judgment to love. This is the big trick, surrendering judgment to love, because judgment is polarity and love is unity. Now, I'm not using love in a fluffy, lightheaded sort of way. I'm using love with its true definition, a state of vibrational harmonization. The Christos pattern is the absolute state of vibrational harmonization, the pre-matter template, where everything else comes through on. That's where polarity doesn't happen yet. If you trust in the pre-matter template, in its perfect pattern of being able to manifest the harmonic, or the nicely flowing where energy flows, which means it feels better, space, you trust the situation to love. There's a way of saying, you can notice, I feel about this. Okay, I'm going into negative judgment. I don't want to do that. Okay, I'll go over here. I'll look at it positive. You can get caught in this. You don't know what to do with your mental body because you're so used to just getting caught in the feeling. It's like the judgments come up from the subconscious. That's bad. I feel this. Oh, that's bad. Or you said that. That's terrible. How could you do that? That kind of thing. Right? You need to catch your reaction patterns and make a choice. Catch it before you get sucked into the hologram with it, because that's what happens. Our consciousness that's supposed to be choosing the hologram gets twisted in to the hologram, and literally the hologram drags you around. Where you can go and have a crying jag for 4 weeks because somebody told you something terrible, or because your spouse decided he was going to leave you for the neighbor next door. You have a choice of how you'll interpret this. I mean, it's kind of funny. If you look at it like the spouse leaving kind of thing, you can say, okay, I love this person. We've been together for 40 years. We have the most wonderful relationship. And all of a sudden, your whole world crashes because that person comes home and says, I'm leaving. I fell in love with my secretary. There's another one of those. That's like the big C word. All of a sudden, you feel like the whole rug was swept out from under your life. Now, if you want to see how any situation can be really perceived from either of its harmonics, one, you can say, oh my God, I'm going to die. I love you so much. How am I going to live without you? And you can go into that whole, oh my God, I'm going to die my whole life. Then you get angry. How could you do this to me? And you go into the negative. That's the lower frequency pattern. Then there's the other part. There's actually a part of you that somewhere will react the opposite. Where it'll go, thank you. Have a nice life. I wish you really well. But the part of you that was in touch with all the things that you felt you needed to surrender in order to keep the harmony in the relationship, all of a sudden, well, yeah, we had a good relationship, and I really love you too. And it's unfortunate because I thought we could maybe do some things together and stay together for a long time. But I really love you, and if it's something you need, that's good. And I'll go explore what things I might need to do. And all of a sudden, the whole situation isn't a negative, then it becomes a positive, which usually confuses the heck out of the person who just thinks they're going to drop a bomb on you. Because they come in like, ooh, I really don't want to tell the person, but I've got to get my freedom. So you tell them, and they react like, oh, okay, yeah, can I help you pack? Half the time, they'll change their mind. Half the time, when you're like, and not meanly, not saying I don't love you, but saying, oh, I love you very much. And it's kind of sad, because I really had some ideas that I thought we were going to do other things together, but obviously that's not working for you. And because the us takes both of us, and you're not content in it, well, I'll let go. I love you, but I'm not going to strangle you. Usually, all of a sudden they calm down, and they decide that, well, I'm not going to pack right now. And then you start to talk, because you reacted in a way that was peaceful and harmonious. You just let it go. You let it be. You weren't attached to the outcome. Personally, if you were going to look at what you'd like to happen, you'd rather them stay, maybe. But if they need to go, you'll survive. So you don't make it their fault. So you don't throw a whole bunch of emotional stuff into the situation and charge it more than it is. That's when you're going into neutral space. These are the ways we've been trained for so long to use our minds in ways to perpetually amplify problems and keep solutions invisible. When you realize problem and solution are just the different polarities, the higher frequency and the lower frequency. You can look at the problem sometimes as the miasm, or the sound. Actually, it's more the other way around. It's usually the problem is the thing that's transmitting out. It's the dion that's transmitting out. And it has its counterpart, solution, turning it back to vibration where then it can be changed. It has a solution, which will be the myon. You have myons and dions, and they are in polarity. How you solve them, how you bring problem and solution together into the same space is turning them into a trion, where you bring the polarities together, allow them to be. That literally brings them into the next octave up, their next highest level of expression. It turns them into trions, and it releases them from your hologram. It takes them, the whole pattern, into a healed state, into another hologram. That's the inner earth timeline. So our mental bodies, what we choose to do with our mental bodies is extremely important. And there's not like a book on this yet, like, okay, instead of looking at this way, I should look at it this way, right? I hope they give one of those books sometime soon, because it would be really helpful. We're so ingrained with our reaction patterns. We have to learn, really, to act instead of react. Because usually what happens, something will come up in our life, either from inside of us or from what appears to be outside of us, and immediately we react to it. We react to it with thought, word, because our emotions are reacting to it. And we follow the emotion instead of stepping back and saying, what is that pattern? We go into fight or flight, which means either run away from it or try to attack it and flatten it. One or the other. Fight or flight is a polarity drama that's being created by implants that are in the DNA, that are manifesting through implants that are in the planetary grid.